Hello everybody, around the world, wherever you're listening to Autistic Radio. It's good to have you there, and it's enjoyable for us to make these programs for you. In a few minutes we'll be joining Harry for 5 p.m. every Sunday. Harry has a curated Facebook with lots of interesting articles for us to discuss. At this point at this point, I mentioned some of the things that we're doing at Autistic Radio with the backing of Autistic Association. And it's Autistic Association I want to go to. I received an email this weekend. I received an email this week with 24 hours notice before the final time that a funding application had to be put in, and it felt to me as though, even though over the last few years I've made the people who have this funding available very aware of Autistic Radio and Autistic Association, that we received the email telling us about the funding as an afterthought, or even we were not expected to have the opportunity to apply for the funding. So within 24 hours I dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, finalised the accounts, wrote a safeguarding statement, and put together quite a long application and got it in time. It looked as though the way the funding was put together to specifically exclude autistic people organisations, APOs. It was written as though it would be necessary to have a non-autistic organisation with some input from an APO. Part of the reason I decided to go to all that trouble and all that work was to take away the excuse that we couldn't be funded because we weren't prepared and we hadn't put in the application. We will see what happens on that. But from what I saw, we not only fitted all the criteria, the proposal that we put was very appropriate for the autistic community, not just having a meaningful input from the autistic community, but from an entirely autistic organisation. The second thing today is about an invitation from the Restraint Reduction Network, which is an organisation here in the UK which brings a lot of different professions together to reduce the amount of times in professional environments such as prisons or mental institutions or schools that the techniques that are taught to caregivers or security staff are not brought to bear as the first option. So we've been invited as a group, if we would like to follow up the suggestion that I made at their recent annual conference, that we had a vox pop and we took the Autistic Radio on the road and set up some microphones in a quiet room and allowed various people with lived experience and also some of the professionals to describe in short conversations their experience of restraint, or from the professional's point of view why they are part of that organisation. So I'm going to bring it and open it to the members here and ask one specific question, and that is, do you think that's something that we should be doing? And if so, is it something we should do as a group and maybe go in a mob-handed or not?
Well, it seems a perfect opportunity. to go as a team somewhere and take our ideas forward and present an opportunity for others to take part as well. So I'm certainly up for that, depending on how others feel.
Yeah, there's two ways of taking part. There is the usual way of taking part, which is remote, but also physically. If people want to travel down to Liverpool and spend a couple of nights in Liverpool and attend the conference, then that's another way of doing it. We're going to be paid the same fee that were paid last time, and they were assuming, before I spoke to you guys, that it would just be myself going along, so that they were going to pay my some of my costs. But the fee and that cost, if we as a group put it together, we could probably make sure the charity could afford to do it for more than one person.
I'm tempted to say just do it like you did the last one. It's almost like Jules on tour. You're going out there to earn us a crust.
Well, I think it's an opportunity for others to actually give Jules some physical support, because even though Jules has done a lot of good work, and but it seems physically not left on his own, but doing things on his own. So if there's someone else there, it would be it'd be a good support for Jules. But obviously, Jules can tell me if that's required or not. I just thought maybe that's more of a team effort, but it all depends on availability and all that, of course. But that's my thinking on it.
No, I support a travelling band as well. I just don't do the social thing.
I totally understand that side of it, because I struggle with that as well. And it's all kind of shop talk and talking about the work that we do. It'll be not a dawdle, but be easier. But then when it comes to socialising kind of thing, it is quite difficult. But I'm sure there's ways around it and ways to protect ourselves.
Okay, well, I'm reading in the text. We've got two people saying they don't want to do the travelling. It sounds as though our chairman, Harry, is volunteering, so that's great. I'm happy to do it. It's either way. I think it's really down to the group to decide whether they're willing to spend the money to do this. If it was myself plus another couple of people, or even another 3 people, we would have the funds to do this, and it fits within our aims of our charity. So when people have had a little bit of time to think about it, then we'll have a bit more of an open discussion. So the bit we've been looking forward to, the 555. Take it away, Harry.
Thanks, Julian. Good evening, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 25th of May, 2025. And this is where we go through the Autistic Radio's Facebook page and go through the recent posts that have been shared, and we talk about them as topics of discussion. The first post is from Emergence, Divergence, the Neurodivergent Ramblings of David Gray Hammond, who's an author and the neurodiversity professionals your parents warned you about. He's kind of changed his description, and that's what the new one says. And what he's shared is a book that he's written, which is regarding autism and psychosis. And on the link itself, it's through Amazon, and this is what it says: A Guide to Autism and Psychosis, Personal and Professional Insights from a Psychotic Mind. In this book, David Gray Hammond takes us on a journey through the landscape of being autistic and psychotic. Using both personal and professional experience, he interweaves academic literature with personal anecdotes, giving context to the loosely studied area of psychosis in autistic people. David highlights the impact of the lack of understanding, as well as discussing how one might help an autistic person experiencing psychosis. Further to this, he considers how we might redefine the role of psychiatry in the lives of autistic people and how we might address the social issues that contribute to psychosis. What's people's thoughts on that? The supporting text on it, to give it, some background, says that whether you're an autistic person, researcher, support worker, family member, or just curious, a guide to autism and psychosis will give you insight into the world of psychotic experiences for autistic people. And hashtag actually autistic, autism, ADHD, and mental health. What's other thoughts?
Okay, I'll say it's a wee bit of a heavy subject. I've listened to David Gray Hammond over the past couple of years and read some of his stuff relating to his experiences with us. Yeah, I'd have to understand a wee bit more about psychosis before I say anything, because it's often mental health issues that bring us to our diagnosis, as we've discussed before. Yeah.
From how I understand psychosis from learning at uni and like past experiences, is that it's almost like everybody's got like a breaking point. There's like a stress point at which our minds will snap. And I feel like that, even just that knowledge really kind of can help to destigmatize like what is a human like experience. I think like it brings up like a lot of big questions, and I think it can be a really difficult thing to recover from as well.
Yeah, I do understand that I've kind of started tonight with a heavy subject, which it just depends how these things come up. But I just found it very interesting about that, because there's so much that could be taken from that, either negatively or positively. And David Gray Hammond always shares very insightful stuff, even if you may not always agree with what he says. He definitely does. He makes you think, and that's what I kind of like about this, and that's why it was shared, even though because the time that I did share it, it would become first on this broadcast. But it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I would like to read this book. I remember seeing a reel, a video that he'd made, and it was he was talking about how our urge to hyper focus, when we get stressed and then we try and hyper focus on everything, that's when our brains start to really struggle. And I found that really relatable. That kind of, that was similar to experiences that I've had as well. Yeah.
There's text shared. It's an AI overview about learning more about psychosis and psychotic disorders. Causes, symptoms and treatment. Psychosis is a term used to describe when someone experiences a loss of contact with reality. This can manifest in various ways, including hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that aren't there, delusions, firmly held beliefs that are not true, and disorganized thinking or speech.
Yeah, I like to think of it as a loss of contact with consensual reality.
There's a number of people saying things like, I like his work a lot, and David Gray Hammond makes things an easy read, dealing with complex subjects.
The next post is from Autism on the Water, which is a charity organisation. Welcome to Autism on the Water, a charitable organisation to raise awareness and assist autistic people to access sailing and boating in the UK. And what they've shared is that they're involved in a competition called the Scottish Series. And it's just an update saying, unfortunately, Team Autism on the Water had to retire from day 3 of the Scottish Series due to a torn mainsail in windy conditions. We're extremely disappointed given how well we are doing, but thankfully the sail is very much repairable and we will be back racing for the final day tomorrow. Despite having to retire today, this is our discard and we are still in a healthy position overall with 3 firsts and 3 thirds, and I did not finish as our discard. We're so incredibly proud of our team for the efforts they're putting in, especially our artistic crew members. We are also very grateful to the volunteers of the Clyde Cruising Club and 707 Sailing for their assistance with our engine troubles. And finally, as ever, our huge thanks to Corner House Tarbert for sponsoring us this weekend. As David Witt of Scallywag says, we never give up, and we'll be back out fighting tomorrow. We have this. What's people's thoughts on this?
Well, it's just great to see this charity, this CIC, making it possible for autistic people to get out there, do something physical, compete, become part of a team. All of those negatives that are associated with autism that tend to make people dependent, this idea increases independence amongst autistic people and puts a very positive message about how it is possible to be autistic, also a competitor, also a sportsman, also a team member.
Yeah, I love things like this. I mean, a lot of the stuff we talk about, like the first one, it's about really intense subjects and very important subjects. But it's good that we also, raise the kind of organize. We talk about. It's also good that we talk about the organisation it's more positive experiences and positive things like the sailing, like we've done other ones in terms of skill sets and art groups or people doing art and writing and music and all those kind of things on their own as a positive hobby or a coping mechanism which they enjoy using. And it's good that these things are out there, especially these charity organisations which from my experience, from what reading, from what they promote, is not patronising sounding, and it sounds all inclusive. And even though we're talking about something that was enforcing it, and it was something that it didn't want to happen, and it happened to them, it was a bit of a setback, it came across very positive, because it's like, we will get there, people are helping to resolve this situation, and we've done so good so far. So that sort of language is very beneficial and helpful for people to read, especially if it's something that people may actually have some interest in, like sailing, etc. The next post is from Awesome Training, which is an education page. Autistic-led, neuro-affirming training, mentoring, consultancy and support for people ready to make the world a better place for autistics. And what they've shared is the following. Perfectionism is a form of self-harm. We talk about perfectionism like it's a quirky character trait, something to joke about in a job interviews. Oh, I'm a bit of perfectionist, we say, half smiling, as if it's a sign of ambition, a mark of someone who cares deeply and tries their best. But the version of perfectionism I want to talk about today isn't funny or charming. It's not about high standards or having pride in your work. That kind of care is something else entirely, something healthy. What I'm talking about is the deep, gnawing compulsion to never be good enough. The kind that sets you up to fail over and over again because the finish line keeps moving. The kind that masquerades as motivation but is actually self-punishment. The kind that starts out as protection and ends up as self-harm. And it's under a blog called Perfectionism as a Trauma Response, and there's a link to the blog itself. But before I read a bit of that, what's people's thoughts on what's been said so far?
I think I'm a bit uncomfortable with the absolutism that I get as a feeling from the wording here, but the sense of it, where perfectionism goes beyond a good thing and goes into something that is actually hurting us, I'm fully with. I think one of the things that we need to be encouraged to do and practice for ourselves is the concept of a good enough job. And if we can adopt the idea of doing something to the 95% level and stop fiddling with it and stop spending all those hours on the last little bit, then we will actually achieve, and we will get something out there, and then something else will come from it. If we're so perfectionist that we don't get past and get something out there, get something published, get something done, then it restricts us.
Part of the blog I'll read out on the link. The first part is just what's already been read out, but what it says is perfectionism as a trauma response. And it says perfectionism for so many of us begins with fear. Fear of being found out. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being loved unless we're exceptional. Maybe we were criticised constantly. Maybe we were praised only when we overperformed. Maybe we learned that mistakes made us unsafe emotionally, physically, socially. So we set out to fix that. To protect ourselves, if I just get it right, then no one can hurt me. If I'm safe, if I'm perfect, then I'm safe. Then and for a while it works, sort of. We get praise, we get noticed. We avoid blame. We control the narrative. But the price is high. The price is ourselves. Because perfectionism is a moving target. It's never arrived at, and it's never enough. So we move the goalposts, we rewrite the rules, we finish something we once thought was brilliant, and instead of resting in that achievement, we call it sloppy, embarrassing, lazy. We erase the version of ourselves that was proud a few days ago and replace them with a cruel editor who demands more perfect. And replace them with a cruel editor who demands more, better, perfect. It's quite intense, these words, but what's people's thoughts on what's been said so far?
I relate to this a lot because that exactly expresses what I go through from the trauma response from being bullied and never been good enough. I now put myself exceptionally high standards which I can't possibly achieve.
There is a comment that's saying it's all guesswork, in their opinion. I can sort of see what it's trying to say, because I do it myself. There's some days where I think, I know it's hard to believe sometimes when I even say it, that I'm absolutely brilliant because all the stuff that I've done well, and things are working out, and I feel a sense of achievement. And because the stuff that I do for the greater good, it's just, it feels great because of the society we live in. It's good that something's good's happening, amongst all the gloom. And there's pride and achievement and all that. But then there's just sometimes where you start to think, or I start to think, and I could have done it a bit better. I could have planned more ahead. So I can sort of get what some of this is saying, but it does seem quite brutal in its approach or in its narrative, even though I do get and understand why it's saying and why it's reading the way it's reading.
I tend to agree with what Jules was saying earlier about, putting up with what's good enough, not putting up with, but accepting what's good enough. From my point of view, it's that matter of being good enough to pass, for want of a better word, that old word pass, which is a bit like masking. I can pass as normal or effective by doing things just good enough to get by. I see that as almost an aspect of fawning, because I reflect back on, early school where I did really well. But that was purely to impress teachers who I saw as substitute surrogate mothers. And to impress them got me places, but then got me into a lot of trouble with social groups. So, I learned to just do enough to get by. So after you leave school, it's just enough to get by for income generation or work or acceptability, social stuff. Whether that's perfectionism is another thing, Perfectionism I see as like something that's a wee bit out of control.
Yeah, I get that. I think what I was talking about there is, the perfectionism's in it, but it's actually drive. It's a drive to do things, to get yourself out of bed in the morning, to get something complete, something worthwhile doing. But then the perfectionism thing comes in later. It's like, do you think, or do I think that I did it good enough? But that's after I've done something, I've been pleased about it already. I mean, the blog continues in terms of what the inner critic becomes the architect, and that society rewards our self-destruction. And then it kind of ends, well, it doesn't end, it continues when self-protection becomes a self-harm. And then it ends, you deserve to be enough. So basically what we're all talking about, I think it's just a long journey of describing what we're basically talking about from a certain narrative.
I think the other thing to think about it is that there is no such thing as perfect. So striving for something that does not exist leaves you in that constant striving for it. Something is never finished, or if you're doing it inside your head and you're thinking about it and you're planning it, it's never started in a practical way. You go through a cycle where you plan it, work out how it should be, and then decide it's not possible, so you don't do it. And that all of those things are debilitating. So the only thing I can sort of pass to say something that is lightening your load is to say that perfectionism doesn't exist, and the perfect job is the job that does the minimum for the achieved result. So set the standard at something that's achievable.
And some of the comments are saying, I never think anything I do is good enough. Everybody's idea of perfect is different. And someone else says, the greatest achievement is getting by even if you fail.
There's also something very important here from a LinkedIn user. They say, my nemesis and my language holds me back. I have the words, but then they don't make sense to me, or I doubt them a lot. I doubt them a lot more now since my diagnosis, which I find frustrating. So there's a bit in that person's comment that's saying that instead of being a positive experience, diagnosis has actually undermined them, which I hope is something that will be something that they pass through. But I can see where somebody would get stuck on that.
I think that's a case of like when you were using an old language and now you almost require a new language. So to use your old language doesn't make sense anymore. Now maybe you had that pre-diagnosis as well, you know, the intimations of like this language I have been given is not enough. But also it's like that explanation and representation and all that. Sometimes I think there's points in your life where that becomes meaningless. You know, it's not in a bad way, it just loses meaning for you. There's other ways of being with things and expressing things and receiving things. And it is a whole new language. It can be very frustrating, yeah. But I also think it's a clue, you know, if you want to treat it like a wee game, it's a clue. It's almost like, you know, to find things, you have to see where they're not. I hope that's not too deep.
The next post is from Grove Neurodivergent Mentoring and Education. It's an education website described as opportunities for neuro-affirming connection, community and growth for autistic young people in the UK through individual mentoring, social and interest-based groups, and autistic identity programs. And what they've shared is a program called Being Me. And they're saying, I'm enjoying putting the finished touches to our Being Me program guide for parents and carers. As well as young people gaining self-understanding, what are we hoping for most with Being Me? That they feel less alone, that they feel a sense of belonging in the group and also in the wider autistic community. That they know there is nothing wrong with who they are, and in fact they can be proud of being autistic. We don't expect them to remember every word, but we hope these feelings will become something they can remember. Most people's thoughts.
I always think that there are two crises in the world of autism. And the first one is the loneliness that comes from the lack of networking and connectedness. And the second one is the society reducing our ability to build self-esteem. I use those two things as a catch-all for everything else that goes with it. So what I perceive here that Grove Neurodivergent Mentoring and Education is attempting to do is address both of those things. So it's something to uphold and support.
I'm just looking at the picture that they shared and the kind of contents of the program they're talking about. Like Neuroaffirming Foundation, how to join the online sessions, the parent carer question and answer sessions, how to get to know one another, our glimmers, interests and joy, the neurodiversity and intersectionality. And the question, what is autism? What does being autistic mean to me and others? And it's also talking about stuff like socializing and communication and friendships, and things like sensory issues, self-adequacy, and looking after myself, and things like that. So it's quite, in-depth and inclusive, and it looks very worthwhile in many ways. Looking at it, from my position. The next post is from Autistic Jazzy, which is a personal blog. Hi, I'm Jazzy and I have level 2 autism with severe ADHD and mental health. I am really happy most of the time, but not always. And I've shared a quote, and it's their own quote. And it says, "In this house we do stimming, rocking, spinning and hand flapping. If you don't like that, you can leave." What's other thoughts?
This could be like a wee doormat, eh? You could have I think it's so important that a home is a safe place for being able to move and sing or hum or whatever, just how you need to be able to kind of re-regulate yourself. I'm really it's really important, and it's been really important for us as a family to have a really a place that we can be ourselves and all feel really safe.
I support Nicola in that. I like the post. I like the crayons. I like the graphic. I like the colours. I just don't like the sort of slightly aggressive bit, which I understand. You know, if you don't like it, you can leave, because it sounds a bit, I don't know. But then I know why people have to bite, you know?
Yeah, it's personal people basically responding to constant criticism of behaviours that looked upon others as abnormal and it shouldn't be happening. And maybe one or two people even get into someone's home and basically telling you how to live in your own home and how to behave in your own home because they're not happy with it. They feel uncomfortable with it. They just say, well, if you don't like it, don't be here. It's like a sort of defence mechanism, a quote of defiance, not being bad, but just people defending themselves, saying there's nothing wrong with what happens here. Stop judging. Because that is a big thing that affects a lot of people, is judgment.
Is there a thing where this is seen as unacceptable in adults? I mean, if it was a house full of kids, nobody would have the right to come in and complain about it being a noisy environment, really. What do they expect? But if you come into a place with adults behaving as they want to, you know, and not behaving in a sort of neurotypical or stereotypical way, an acceptable way, suddenly they've got this right to lay down some kind of law.
Yeah, you're right, Raymond. The reason it's biting back is because people do tell us to sit still. They do tell us not to hand flap, and they do tell us to grow up. I'm a 60-year-old man. I have all kinds of stims, everything from biting my nails to sitting watching the TV, rocking on a rocking chair. It's my own home, and if you come into my own home, I wouldn't expect you to lay down the law. And people do tend to judge and criticise autistic people for our stims. So that's why it's a biting attitude here.
Even out in the wild, Jules, in your most recent public appearance, you know, the fact that you got up out your chair at times, moved around, I was sitting here cheering. You know, it's like, yes, that's how it's done. That's what we're like. Well, it's not what we're like. That's what Jules is like. And, you know, it's often what is seen as disconcerting to people who have been kind of conditioned and taught to sit still.
Yeah, I can remember that. And I can remember, like in school or... In fact, actually, I do remember actually going to a hospital appointment and I was told to lie still because I was getting an x-ray, or it was something you had to sit still for about half an hour while a machine did its thing. And I moved, and the nurse or whoever was quite abrupt But I was only a young boy at the time. My dad was there, and my dad did pull them up. And it's long before my diagnosis of autism. It was just more to do with, a young boy kind of moving, it's going to happen sometimes, a wee bit of patience, so there is that sort of, you must stay still and it's a sort of kind of behaviour sort of demand in many ways. Because if you move, it's like, I don't know, it's a noise or it's just something you shouldn't do. It's quite strange if you're asking someone autistic to do it though, because to move is to, not just autistic people, to move is to make yourself comfortable. So, yeah, a lot can be taken from that.
Okay, I'll read that out. Someone was saying in the comments that most support is about teaching compliance, and then followed it up with school is about compliance, to which someone replied, making reference to an earlier conversation about meeting people in the street, that he said that school is a machine for churning people out for work. To which the chap that he met in the street replied, yeah, I've heard someone tell me that before.
Yeah, absolutely. Even felt like that at the time. I'd been in school and it's just like, it's this, they're kind of churning you out for work. But as I've said many times before, it wasn't like they were churning you out for work, or maybe they were, but the attitude wasn't like, it wasn't just any job. It's like you had to have a career. And if you ended up doing a certain job in society, like bin lorry driver or bin man, which my dad was, or a cleaner, which my mother was, that was seen upon as failing your education, and that was the sort of compromise of what you had, or not, I wouldn't say punishment, but it's just like, that's just the consequence of not trying hard enough in school and not getting the right grades and all that. So it wasn't just like churning out work, it was like trying to churn out lawyers and, careers people for all over things. It was quite a strange thing to think about. And yes, the compliance thing, the way that you behave, the way that you dress, the way that you are, do as you are told. I mean, even though there has to be some sort of guidance in life, it's just sometimes it just seems so tough on children. And I would hope now it isn't as brutal as it was 30 years ago.
The only reason I really moan about school a lot is because the opportunity there to discover yourself is never given. To a certain extent it is, but usually it's by accident that you find out what you like and what your passions are and what you're good at. Despite everything, you find that somehow, either through a relationship or friends or something. But the school is teaching you what it declares to be important, which is the 3 R's usually, to be able to read and write, to calculate numbers, to get by in life. These are the things that help you get by in life, and how to behave is an aspect of that. But a lot of the jobs you mentioned there, Harry, like a bin man and a cleaner, they don't necessarily teach you how to do these jobs at school. They may do in an indirect way. You put the bins out or you wipe that up, but really you think, what did they teach us, that would have been useful for us, It is just kind of like fitting in. But I'm not going to be totally negative about it. For a lot of people, that is how to do it. I'm actually sitting on my hands right now, Jules.
Yeah, I remember kids being told to sit on their hands if they were fidgeting at school. So I put that in the comments.
The next post is from I've Been Autistic All Along, who's a blogger, sharing my experience of life with memes, cats and sunsets sprinkled in. Not everything I post is autism, and a qualified autism peer support worker. And they have shared a quote. And they say, my needs aren't special. They're just needs, and I deserve to have them met. And the supporting text says, all humans do. Of course, we can force others to meet them, but we can try our best to meet our own where we can. What's your thoughts on that?
Getting your needs met is a difficult one, because first of all, what are your needs? How do you know what they are?
Yeah, I like the quote together with like the captions sort of saying like, we can do our best to meet them ourselves. We can't really demand that others meet them and stuff. But yeah, like what you were saying, Raymond, like how do we know what our needs are? And I think there's definitely ways. I've been learning a bit about like it's called like sensory ladders and trying to notice, what's going on in your body and when you're getting overstimulated, what happens, what's going on then, and what's like, and then trying to break down. Like at first you might go, yeah, when I lose it, when I get overwhelmed, this is what happens. Then you can start to sort of zoom in and see what little kind of warning signs happen for you before that. And then it feels from like figuring out these feelings, then it's a bit easier to can recognize the needs. I just really wonder if you were like, it's just harder. I don't know. It feels hard learning this, like when you've spent a lot of time pushing down needs. I mean, my motivation's there because I don't want to hit burnouts, and I don't ever want to shut down as badly as I have in the past. But I find it really difficult, hard work to do, actually.
There's all these other words like wants and desire, but I sometimes think about instinct. It's like, what is your instinct telling you? What's your gut? What's your body telling you? And you brought up a word in a discussion we had about herbs once, which was relating to, what was that word? Did it begin with a no, which was a way of relating?
Yeah, the organoleptic way of experiencing herbs. So rather than going, oh, what's that plant? What does that do? It's like a much using your senses to be able to notice and tell. Like if you sort of chew a little bit of a plant, you can tell if it's got saponins. It's like it'll get kind of bubbly in your mouth. Then you can know what sort of things that, oh, that's useful for this or that. So yeah, I like what you're saying there about that kind of way of relating to the world, and it does to me feel like it's been a similar process.
I often think that needs are kind of unspoken because there is a list of needs. There's Maslow's hierarchical pyramid chart of self-actualizing as a person and an individual. And there's some very basic needs like, feeding yourself, staying warm, comfort, human relationship, which I sometimes wonder about. But I think, belonging, there are senses of these things, and I think they are experienced bodily, before they're thought about. And they go way back to early child rearing even. But I'm also thinking needs in an adult might be, the need to have a happy life, to feel comfortable and balanced. And that is often what I think we're asking for when we express our needs.
There's something different about Nicola's situation, because she's a mother, she's got 2 kids at home, and when you're a parent, well, sorry, I think it's 2 kids at home. Okay, so scrub that for the edit. I'll start again. There's something different about Nicola's situation, because she's a mother looking after kids at home, and the parent in that situation, autistic or not, is making compromises constantly about their own needs and the needs of the family. And they're also acting as an example to their kids to enable them to follow methods that the parent uses to get their own needs met. So the balance of all of that is quite difficult, and it takes an enormous amount of energy.
Yeah, there's been a comment from LinkedIn user saying, "Don't be tough," which is a quote from a song, I think, from an American musician, Jason Isbell.
Yeah, I mean that brings in the idea a lot with men, I think. I can't speak for the other genders' experience, but pretending you don't need something because you're not getting it closes you off from actually getting what you need. Being tough and manning up or denying your own needs for things can be very dangerous for your own mental well-being. So recognizing your own needs and then finding strategies to have those needs met without impinging on other people is the way forward.
Oh, also, I'm really into using like a feelings wheel. If I get stuck, if I'm feeling something, I'm like, oh, I don't know what this is. Like sometimes seeing the word just kind of helps. And when I was trying to find a nice looking feelings wheel to print online, I came across needs wheels as well, and I find them really great. It's like all these different human needs, like that to kind of look at them sometimes helps you connect when you can find the right word. So yeah, it was easy to Google. You can just Google needs wheel. Someone in the chat says people don't seem to see socializing as a need. I've never heard that before.
Well, it's certainly true. I do agree with that comment.
Well, I think I might know where that person's coming from, because I remember first dealing with autism professionals, and I couldn't get them to see that one of the things that we needed as an autism group or an autistic group was networking, and it was the networking of us that brought forward things like socializing. So it does seem that there can be a mistake in identifying us and seeing us as entirely separate from the rest of humanity rather than the social beings that we are.
I like the word participation in that context, because you can be social and non-social.
I hope that's shifted. Like, I actually do understand now what you're meaning, because, and it would probably be going back more like sort of 6 years, to where it was before, I feel like there's been a lot more autism awareness in the since lockdown. But before that, even, and I remember going to a GP talking about autism, speaking to a therapist about autism and stuff, and it just, there was that kind of attitude, oh well, you don't really need people, you'll be fine, you know, and having the sense of, but I do want to connect with people, but I just can't seem to do it the way that it seems there for me in the mainstream. So it's not that if I was just going to like stay in a room for the rest of my life, I don't think I would be here trying to get a diagnosis in the first place. So yeah, I do understand what you're meaning, and I think it's just where, like, the circles that I'm in now, the social need is, and maybe that's been a kind of something that we've all understood a bit more since lockdown too, that social needs are important and that we are social creatures.
I need connection, but I can't always do it in the way that's expected. So everything that I do is now almost entirely reliant on transport, which I could be without in a few weeks' time. And that gets diminished by all these charities. When you say you're depressed, they will just try and diminish it with comparison.
I'd also say, like, I don't socialise a lot in real life, and my social needs are quite well met online. I enjoy it means I enjoy my real life more, and I do have some in real life connections, and I really value them. But I would say, volume wise, I'm more comfortable here. You know, this is social to me.
In relation to that, Nick, I always wonder, like, you know, if we were born like maybe 100 years ago or even 50 or 60 years ago, would we be letter writers, you know, communicating through text, waiting for the mailman, you know, sending telegraphs even, you know? But then again, life back then would have been demanding in another way, that you could not really ever be isolated. Or perhaps you could, because I read a lot about writers who lived kind of isolated lives in rural, people during the war who had to be stuck away in like really barren parts of Scotland and wrote great novels out there, and had very minimal relationships, which were all very, very exciting in their way.
I think I would have definitely been a letter writer. As a kid in the 90s, I had a lot of international pen pals. I loved that. I felt so close to them, and didn't really have many connections here. So yeah, for sure.
Or even build your own ham radio and get into shortwave.
Yeah, I really think we need to do this, Jules, by the way. Can we have like some analog radio situation, please?
I socialise mainly around playing music at open mics, music jams, singing in the choir and doing crafts, and that's just not available locally. I can't even go down to the day centre because I've been banned for live having a meltdown. So if my transport goes, so does 90% of my social life.
Robbie, there was this thing they used to always say about punk rock, which was like, you know, if it doesn't exist, you've got to invent it. You know, if you're looking around for what you want and what you need and nobody's providing it, then the job's then up to you. You've got to provide it. Now, I resisted that for a bit because I'm not a naturally born leader, you know, and it kind of needs the drive of a leader to do that sort of thing. But sometimes if you just do your thing, eventually you get noticed. But I wouldn't rely on that. So sometimes what you've got to do is set up the group yourself, set up the space and the place yourself. I'm not saying you go and do that and put the pressure on you. You know, I'd hate somebody to do that to me. But I just think that's a fact of life. You really.
I'm doing that with like a peer support group here, and it's like been such hard work. It's been ages in the making, and we're getting our way through constitution and stuff now. But like now that I've got people kind of working alongside me on it, it's the best feeling. It's so good, and like it reminds me of this little YouTube video I saw ages ago, and it was like at a festival, and this one person just. The crowd of everybody sitting down, and one person gets up and just starts throwing themselves around crazy dancing. And it just is like one Raj person in our group. Like, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. But then, like, 2 other people just running and join in. And there's just something about the momentum just started to build. And then, like, this became a group of about 100, like 150 all dancing just in the field. And yeah, like, I really recommend trying to get something started, like a little community group. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, I was going to have an open door policy where I just left my door open and turned my house into a shop and sold stuff and, you know, broke millions of laws by doing that. But friends that I expressed this idea to kept coming at me negative things like, oh, you'll just get ripped off, man. You know, oh no, people letting people in your house, oh, you'll get robbed, you know, and all that. And I thought, no, in the old days, we used to be quite a community. We used to have jumble sales and shit like that. You know, what happened?
Yeah, but maybe there was a wee community already around it was quite protective, and so there'd be folk looking out for you. I've been learning about cuckooing this week, which is where like in county lines, which is where like drug gangs will move in on a vulnerable person. They'll be like befriend them. It's about like mate crime that Jules had mentioned last week or the week or so before, but it's like, you know, they befriend a vulnerable, lonely person, and then just be like, you know, well, actually, they've got a wee council house, or they've got like some benefits coming in, and you can sort of tap into that kind of comfortable cover. And before you know it, there's somebody who's like knee deep in a big problem. And there are organisations that are sort of specialising in trying to help people out of that, but I think a lot of people can get in quite bad ways. Not to be
YouTube.
so negative.
No. On YouTube, you can find a Channel 4 documentary specifically about that, where people were being used for mail shots.
The next post is from Autism Together, which is a charity organisation and is one of the leading providers of autism services and support in the UK. And what is shared is a post regarding there were a community event in Chester recently. And they said our admissions officer, Paula Armiger, was joined by Emma Turner, who manages our Bridge Farm site in Ellesmere Port, as they attended an event at the New Scene Centre. Parents and carers were able to drop in for a coffee and chat with our staff to ask questions about autism and find out what support may be open to them in the local area. Emma was also very pleased to tell people about the different services we offer at Bridge Community Farm. It was an excellent event, well attended by other organisations, including Cheshire West and Cheshire Navigator Service, Health Watch and Koala, to name just a few. And I've went into the link of Bridge Community Farm, their own page. And what that is Bridge Community Farm in Ellesmere Port is a CIO currently being managed by Autism Together, which is a registered charity. We offer a community cafe and volunteering opportunity at the farm to support the community alongside space rental for community groups. What's your thoughts?
just think it's great that they've got a wee premises to be able to do this stuff from, and it can be quite hard to deliver services because getting spaces to work from can be so hard, and we've been able to sort of tap into different community centres to be able to get space and things like that. But yeah, what a great resource, and I hope it goes well for them.
It seems that BW Gardens link in the Bridge Community Farm description is a dead link.
The next post is from Autistic Not Weird, which is a community page, and it's articles and insight about autism from Chris Bonello, an autistic author, advocate, speaker, and former teacher. And all articles copyright Chris Bonello 2015 to 2025. And what is shared is the following. Some teachers make the mistake of seeing differentiation. Some teachers make the mistake. Some teachers make the mistake of seeing differentiation as giving more opportunities to the clever kids and less opportunities to the END kids. This is entirely wrong and it's harmful. Real meaningful differentiation means giving the same opportunities to all the students, but making them more accessible based on their needs. And what it says also is it's not about offering more or less opportunity. It's about accessibility of opportunity. A few years ago, I was speaking at the SEND conference, and the speaker after me was the lead SEND Ofsted inspector, Ofsted being the UK's school inspectorate. In the interest of integrity, I gave my honest views about Ofsted's inflexibility when it comes to the teaching methods, and was expecting quite a counter-argument when the inspector took the stage. What I didn't expect was for him to begin his speech by saying, "Hello everyone, I'm not going to give a counter-argument to anything Chris said, because he is absolutely right." So yeah, Ofsted accredited a criticism of Ofsted. More to the point though, he came up to me afterwards and asked me to send him the quote from my speech, because he wanted to use it in an Ofsted SEND staff training. So I made the following for him. What's people's thoughts on this post?
Did I miss something here? What does SEND stand for?
Sorry, I'm just having a look on that.
Special educational needs and disabilities. So I just googled it.
Well, you're certainly faster than me, Nicola. I was taking about an age just to see what it is, so thanks for that. It is an acronym that seems to be very recent, but it may be longer than that. But thanks for that.
If you go to any of the professional conferences, it's send this, send that. It's an umbrella term meaning any of their clients, really. It could mean neurodivergent people, it could mean brain damaged people, anything where somebody requires something that's out of the rather narrow version of education that's often put forward.
So what?
Like,
Sorry.
yeah, I was just going to say, sometimes I find myself feeling more comfortable. I don't know if that's important, with like additional support needs rather than these special needs. It just feels like additional needs just does, I don't know, it just feels a bit better to me.
I'm wondering what this first line means. It's not about offering more or less opportunity, it's about accessibility of opportunity. Is that stating that there is no opportunity being offered at all? I think what it said above in the thing is giving more opportunities to the clever kids and less opportunities to the send kids. But then accessibility of opportunity. Not quite getting this clear in my head.
The next post is from Rosie Weldon's Autistic Life, which is a personal blog. I am an autistic adult that shares my life openly and honestly online. And she shared a quote. Autistic life is spending so much mental energy just getting through the day. What's people's thoughts on that?
That's why I have a routine, because it makes it easy. Everything is a routine. Meals are a routine. What I do on days of the week is pretty much fixed. That's how I get through.
Yes, that is very important, because many people in society who will feel they're stuck in a rut, feel lost, is the lack of routine, but being stuck in a vicious cycle. So they're in some kind of routine, but it's quite negative. But it doesn't feel like a routine that they have control over. But if they create a routine and are able to get a routine that's more positive minded, it feels that that's like the step forward for a coping mechanism, just to get yourself either out of bed, or if you're housebound quite a lot, just to get out the door and go somewhere, like going to a shop, or even just going for a walk in a park on a quiet day. And it's maybe something you do every day that maybe kind of gets you going. Just something to look forward to doing. I think that's the main thing as well. It's like something that makes sense, and in many ways in the routine, something to look forward to. And that includes, having meals at set times, etc. It just depends on the person and what they're looking to do and how to move forward.
This works exactly against my experience of life. And that is why I feel sometimes as though I'm on the margins of the autism or autistic community, because I do not feel that my autism is just about extending my mental energy just to get through the day. If an autistic person is in good circumstances and has the opportunities and has the supports around them, then it's not just about getting through the day. It's about being creative. It's about having a purpose and having a goal and achieving things. And every single day I am involved in so many different things that I believe most non-autistic people would struggle to deal with. The variety of things I do within a day. So for me, being autistic is not a struggle. So I just want the autistic community to accept and bring within the community people like me who do not feel entirely disabled by their autism, and have us as part of the autism community. We do not have to be struggling to be a member.
Do you feel, Jules, that you discovered very early when you were young, possibly through a form of independence, that you were able to access these capacities within yourself before they became sort of traumatized or conditioned, which I think is a thing that in my case as an adult senior even has arisen, due to long periods of struggling and masking with situations that are supposedly normal but were very uncomfortable. And so I think it was at a young age that the trauma stepped in, but not a very young age, but maybe teens and into 20s, where it was like the encounters with adult life. And I thought, I can manage, and then I couldn't manage. So, because there's something in that. I think when you see the young getting advantages today, I hope, in exploring that creativity you speak about, the opportunities, then there's great hope that they're going to have great lives. They may still struggle in a lot of ways because it's an intense sensory existence. It's not, and so routine is one of the methods of managing that sensory overload.
I recognise everything that people talk about, using routines as a way of stopping being overstimulated. All these things that I recognise, but I've been fortunate, and I think you're right. I have not been traumatised in the way that so many autistic people have been traumatised. And trauma is not the necessary requirement to be part of the club. There are many autistic people that I know who have managed to avoid bullying. I have never been bullied. And they've managed to avoid trauma. I have to say that I had the opportunity, and I dropped out of society when I was 16, and I left, and I went off with my tent and my bicycle, and I was entirely independent, so nobody had the control over me, and that continued until I got into society in the ages of 20. So it's a fortunate situation.
Yeah, I was like the reverse of you. It was like the society first trauma and then go independent and escape it.
For me, it isn't the autism that's causes the extra use of energy. It's a lack of accommodations to meet my needs. When I was supported by my father, I didn't have this problem, but now I'm having to do things in a way that's not natural to me. That's when I struggle in.
I think when you say accommodations, Robbie, is that what others would call adjustments? Because I just did a online autistic post-diagnosis group this week, and this week's subject was adjustments and benefits.
Yes, I mean, the same thing. It's
question
like,
was, what kind of adjustments would you like or would you require? Sorry,
It's
go
like-
on, Robbie.
it's like if organisations would provide a different form of communication than phone, I wouldn't have the extra stress of having to find someone to phone for me.
I think that illustrates, you can illustrate the difference between adjustments and accommodations by what Robbie has just said. If it was adjusted so that Robbie didn't have to phone, but he could text or chat or do something appropriate to him, then that would be an adjustment and he would be in control of that, or somebody would be offering that adjustment to him. An accommodation is something that tends to be handed down to you, so that we will accommodate you by making the phone call for you.
The next post is from Swan Autism Scotland. It's a community page, and Swan is an autistic-led charity run by and for autistic women and non-binary people since 2012. And they've shared the following. We can't believe it. One of our wonderful swans is fundraising for us. Christine is on a mission to walk 50,000 steps to raise money to support Swan. Every step I take represents not just a physical challenge, but a commitment to raising awareness and funds for this vital charity. I'm aiming to raise £500 to contribute towards Swan initiatives, providing resources and support through courses, training, advocacy, and safe spaces to socialise. With your help, we can make a significant impact in the lives of many who are navigating the complexities of autism, seeking acceptance and a way to find their place in a world that can be very confusing and overwhelming. She's already well on her way to achieving our massive step count. Can you donate to help boost our energy and our fundraising target? Visit Christine's page on the link to find out more about what she's doing and why. And if you're not in a position to donate, please help by sharing if you can. Thank you, and a huge thank you to Christine. And it's a link provided through Just Giving, Christine's fundraiser for Swan Autism Scotland. What's your thoughts?
Briefly, this is making me think about a radio programme I heard this week on Radio 4, Moneybox, about how small charities who try to do their own fundraising are being penalised now by banks, who are now charging them about £4.50 a month to keep an account for very small deposits.
That's exactly the problem that we're having in our community group. It's really, really difficult. And getting charged by transaction when you're tiny, we probably need about £35 a month, and so I feel like that just seems really disproportionate.
Some groups are losing all that they're creating in a year in just maintaining a bank account.
There are ways around this. Most organisations, for their accounting, simply need to provide records, and it's unnecessary for them to have a bank account in the name of the organisation. Where it becomes necessary is when they become incorporated into something like a charity, and if you are incorporated into a charity, then it becomes a little bit easier. So other organisations, it's quite possible for somebody who is the trusted member to hold an amount in a separate private bank account. The only issue is whether those people abscond with the funds. So it's when you make a joint bank account, and if you make a joint bank account as a private, two private people, then what you do there is you attach your credit reference together. So yes, there are slight ways around this when you're really small, but it's an issue.
Well, thanks everyone for discussion tonight. We're just going to run out of time. It's been a great discussion, and it started quite intensely, but thankfully through natural kind of theme of the way that I kind of share it, it actually comes through, different, more positive posts and topics that we touch on throughout the podcast. It's absolutely fantastic. And people's views and interpretations, that's what adds to the whole conversation. It's not just one or two different opinions. It's like 3 or 4, sometimes 5 or 6 different viewpoints, which adds to the conversation and even adds to even learning new things and information that's out there. So thank you once again. And of course, thank you to the people that share these posts, which make these conversations possible. So this is Harry's Facebook for 25th of May 2025, which is part of the Spectrum Voices Conversations 5:55 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. UK time on Facebook Live and on other platforms including YouTube and LinkedIn. So thank you once again, and now I'll hand over to Jules.
Thank you for your work again, Harry. Here we'll talk about the work we do with Autistic Association that supports Autistic Radio.